Okay. All right. So our guest today is May Dorricott, and May is a young ocean enthusiast and was the 2017 European Our World Underwater Scholarship Society's Rolex Scholar with an undergraduate degree in marine biology and currently studying a master's in science communication. She was able to embark on a year of worldwide travel, all to do with scuba diving and the oceans. So the scholarship enhanced her passion for the seas, exposing her to new ways of exploring this environment, as well as learning alongside world leaders in marine biology, underwater photography, and science communication. So May, I'm super excited to have you here, and we're all really excited to hear what you have to share with us. So if you want to get started and let us know, that would be great.
Okay, cool. I shall begin. Hello, everybody. My name is May, like Madison said, and I am super excited to speak to so many of you today. As you can tell, I'm actually English. So at the moment, for me, it's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But I'm hopefully going to share my screen with you right now, and we can begin my presentation. So you can see some of you there. Hello. Right, moving on. This is my presentation called Telling Stories of the Sea, because I think that's primarily what I am, a storyteller. But I'll get into that in a bit. First of all, I want to kind of throw back a couple of years, around 20 years ago, and this was me. That's me in the middle with a mask and snorkel that was way too big for me. And I was really blessed. My mum comes from Malaysia. And when I went to go visit my mum's family, we used to go snorkeling. And this was the point that changed my life. This is when I knew that I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I did everything I could to train up with scuba diving and get the grades that I needed to go to university and study marine biology. And I graduated in 2016 and I loved it. I loved everything about the course and I felt like I was ready to be a marine biologist, but I kind of wanted to still gain a bit more experience in the field with real life marine biologists, if you will, people who had done it for years and who I could learn from. And I found this scholarship, the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society, which offers 3 scholarships a year, one to an American citizen, one to someone from Europe, and one from Australia. And it's sponsored by Rolex, and the person who wins it gets to do whatever they want to do within the year, as long as it involves scuba diving and their academic interest. I applied for it and I won. And it took me around the world. I went to 17 different countries, spent around 200 hours underwater, and got to learn from some of the best people in the underwater industry. Some of my key highlights were diving with bull sharks and other kinds of sharks, like great white sharks too. I also got to do some crazy things as well, like cave diving, and here I'm with Christina Zanato in the Bahamas, exploring some caves which very few people ever get to do. But one of my key things that I really wanted to do, like I said before, was meet amazing marine biologists who I could learn from. And in this picture here is a lady called Dr. Sonia Rowley. And she is 1 out of 3 people to ever win the David Attenborough Award for her fieldwork. And her fieldwork is fantastic. What she does is she uses scuba diving and a very special kind of scuba diving called rebreather diving to explore the mesophotic zone, which some of you may know as the twilight zone, which is beyond 40 meters deep on reefs where the light starts to dwindle away. And the organisms that dominate these deeper reefs are these. They're called gorgonians, also known as sea fans. And because there's low light here, what they do is they branch out away from the rock and into the deep. And with all those tiny little polyps, all those tiny little flowers that you can kind of see on the gorgonian, they grab any kind of passing food that goes by. And she dives down to over 140 meters, which is a dive time of around 6 hours to do. And because it's so deep, and because hardly anyone has ever been down to these depths on Scuba before, she can collect new species on every single dive. So this was an amazing expedition to be a part of when we were out there in Micronesia. And I couldn't go as deep as Sonia because I wasn't as experienced. But here you can see me diving on what we call a rebreather. So there's no bubbles. And I got to stay down on these reefs for around 3 hours at a time, collecting data on these remote reefs that hardly anyone had ever been to. And what I was doing was collecting in this bottom right corner here, you can see some sponges. So they're a little bit different. They are actually animals still. But again, no one had ever been here. No one had known what kind of species grew on these reefs. So that's what we were collecting, trying to find out the abundance of species on these absolutely gorgeous and magical places. But even though we were so remote, I started to notice things that I'd kind of studied at university. And one of them was coral bleaching. So in this photo here, you can see we were at a place which is very far away from any mainland, a tiny little atoll called Ant Atoll in the middle of the Pacific. And in this photo here, you can see a couple of things. First of all, that all of the corals in this photo are dead. And what happened was the previous year, before we went, there was a huge rise in temperature of the oceans, and all of the corals, they can't really stand it when it's a bit too hot. They kind of like the Goldilocks zone of temperature. And when it gets too hot, they expel this kind of plant-like material that lives within them. It kind of discolors them, so they go pale, and then they kind of slowly die because they can't survive without that algae. What you can also see here is there's hardly any fish, which was quite troublesome, because what that means is that there's no fish to kind of graze on the fluffy algae that grows on the reefs and keeps it nice and healthy. So there were all of these different problems that I started to see, and I kind of became aware of the fact that the local people in this area weren't aware of the state of their reefs. And it wasn't because they didn't care, it was because they couldn't see what was going on underneath. We were doing scuba diving that was really technical and hardly a lot of people can do. So imagine for the local people who don't really get to snorkel and don't get to scuba dive, they couldn't see what was happening to their resource that they depended on. This is where my marine biology interest started to diverge, and I started to become interested in how I could communicate everything I saw underneath the waves to other people. So I started to learn how to do underwater photography, and I got to learn from some amazing people who taught me that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if you could capture someone's interest in an image of animals that they don't normally get to see, then you can start to discuss all the problems that they may be facing. But a problem that I came across time and time again whilst I was traveling during my scholarship was plastic pollution. And this is a little photo that I took when I was in Lembeh in Indonesia. And Lembeh is one of the most diverse places in the world. It has so much biodiversity, but it also had an incredible amount of plastic pollution. And this here is a tiny little juvenile reef fish who was using this plastic shard as some protection, basically, from any predators. But it wasn't the only place I saw plastic pollution. Back in Micronesia, they found a turtle washed up on the beach, and we dissected it and found all of these fragments of plastic within its stomach. When I went to La Paz in Baja California, which is one of the hotspots for whale sharks, which you can see in this photo here, unfortunately, this juvenile whale shark had been entangled in some nylon fishing net and eventually drowned and washed up on this beach. And this is the effort to try and get the whale shark off the beach. And every beach that I went to, we did some beach cleans, and this is a photo that my friend Libby took of all of the plastic that we found in just an hour's beach clean. And I'm sure you can spot some things in this photo that you see every single day. Some things here we call single-use plastic, and 70% of the stuff that we find on beaches are the things that we use once and throw away. And just to put into context, here's a crazy fact for you. In 2016, 300 million tons of plastic was produced. And to kind of picture that, if you were to weigh every single adult On planet Earth, that is how much plastic we produced in 1 year alone, that weight. It's crazy. And to kind of make it even more crazy, when I did an internship at a lab called Necton, where they do deep sea biology, they went down to 3,000 meters to collect mud to see what was in the mud at a place where no one had ever been to before, 3,000 meters deep in the sea. They found these fragments of plastic. Plastic had made it to a place before human beings had gone to explore. So this was towards the end of my scholarship year, and I was going to do my master's in science communication, and I thought, how do other people see plastic? These were all of the things that I was able to see during my journey around the world. But I kind of started to think, is this the same? Does anyone else see plastic the way that I do? Do they see it as a scary thing like I do? So this is what I started to do my research on during my master's. So I did a two-pronged methodology. So here's a little bit of experimental design for you. I did a newspaper analysis as well as a public survey. I wanted to know, what had newspapers and magazines been talking about when they mentioned plastic pollution? What was the context in the way that they framed those stories? And then I also wanted to ask everyone I knew, as well as some other people, about how they saw plastic, what influenced their decisions when they used plastic, and how did they learn about plastic pollution. So here's a few graphs for you. We'll quickly go over this because this is all a little bit boring. But what I saw was, when I looked at how plastic was mentioned in the newspapers over time, there were two significant peaks. And one was when there was a lot of microplastic campaigning, and everyone started to campaign against microbeads. So there was a sudden peak in interest in newspapers during that time. Another very recent peak was when Blue Planet 2 came out, and I'm sure a couple of you have seen this. But when Blue Planet 2 came out, suddenly loads of newspapers started talking about plastic pollution, so that really interested me. Then I kind of looked at what kind of different plastic was mentioned when newspapers covered it. And I also wanted to kind of tie that into, were they talking about science behind plastic pollution? Were they talking about the impacts? Were they mentioning people's responsibility? And I kind of tried to group that into different types of plastic. And this is a bit complicated, but it all kinds of ties in a bit. Then when I asked individuals, how did they rank their knowledge of plastic pollution compared to other things like the coral bleaching that I saw in Micronesia, or ocean acidification, what was that? And overfishing, again, the stuff that I saw in Micronesia, did they know as much about those things as they did about plastic pollution? And interestingly, everyone ranked their own knowledge of plastic pollution higher than any other ocean-based issue. 86.4% of people that I talked to, so quite a lot of people, knew that marine life was strongly affected by plastic pollution. 68.3% also strongly agreed that they were worried about the environmental impact of plastic pollution. But only 33.3% of people were worried about their own health in the context of plastic pollution. And this is all very interesting, because when we look at what people said initiated them to possibly change their behaviors, were things like watching Blue Planet 2. So when people said that they watched Blue Planet 2, they said that they were going to change their behavior. Mm-hmm. Or when they'd, like me, pardon? Sorry? Am I talking quite fast? Sorry, I'll slow down. When people said that they had surfed on beaches and seen plastic like I had when I was scuba diving, they said that that made them want to change their behavior towards plastic use too. And then other things like Facebook and Instagram, when people had seen a straw stuck up a turtle's nose, that's what they wanted. That's initiated them to change their behavior. And also just family and friends, like talking about it to people who had seen it and witnessed it, that influenced people to change their behavior too. But the kind of conclusive remark, when I started to pull all of that information together, I came across this quote. And it says that it is not enough for people to just know about an environmental issue in order to be engaged, but they need to care about it, be motivated, and be able to take action. And what that kind of strong to me was the fact that everyone knows about plastic pollution and everyone talks about it, but not a lot of people actually do actions in their everyday life that makes a massive difference. We may reuse our water bottles and we may say no to a plastic straw, but there's a lot of other things that we have to start to consider if we're really going to start to make a change with plastic pollution as a whole affecting the oceans. So something that I've recently done is help found a new charity called Plastic Pollution Awareness and Action Projects. And I found this with a guy called Nassim who works in the curry industry. And we both said together that takeaways, when you go and get a takeaway in the evening, there's so much plastic involved with that. There's from the plastic Tupperware to the knives and forks. And maybe if we could tackle this industry together, we could start to make a change, at least in one segment of the whole catering industry. So what we did was we held an event called Curry in Conversation, and we invited marine biologists, people who are campaigners, people who work in curry houses and takeaway businesses and restaurants, people who manage the waste facilities in our local towns. And we all came together and started to discuss the problem, and not just the problem, but the solutions that we could work together holistically to make a bigger and longer lasting change. So that's what I do in my spare time. But at the moment, I'm actually, my full-time job is working in TV. Because like I said, I'm a storyteller, and all of these things that I've been able to see around the world have really inspired me to want to tell more stories. So what I do now is I research stories for Animal Planet. And we're currently working on a new series. I can't tell you the name of it, but I can tell you that it involves lots of dolphins and whales and sharks as we go and explore different parts of the oceans to find out more secrets about them. So I still am a marine biologist at heart, learning about the ocean every single day to tell more interesting stories about what scientists are currently studying. So I think I talked a little bit too fast there at certain points. I'm a little bit sorry. But if you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer anything from scuba diving, science, and anything else you may have, maybe more specific to plastic pollution. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, May. That was great to hear all of your adventures and everything that you've been involved in.
No worries.
For the classrooms that are tuning in live on YouTube, if you want to use the chat sidebar and let us know where you're from and shoot us any questions that you have, that'll be great. With that, we'll start the Q&A. So Miss Lou's class, grade 5 from San Jose, California. Can you give me a big wave?
Have you found unexperienced creatures?
Have I found any, what, sorry, could you repeat the question?
Have you ever found unexperienced creatures?
Or how have you experienced?
I mean, have you ever experienced unknown creatures?
Oh, unknown creatures. So like new species, I guess? Like brand new species to science, I guess, is what you're asking. So yeah, when I was in Micronesia with Dr. Sonia Rowley, back in Micronesia, every time that she dived, she brought up a new coral, which was amazing. So these are like these beautiful, they look like flowers, but they're not flowers. They're gorgeous animals. And so, yeah, we found some new species, new unexperienced creatures, if you will. But something which is really cool, which is not new, but really endangered, was an angel shark. And this is the most endangered species of shark in the world. And I got to go and spend some time in Tenerife, which is the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, and really shallow. So basically you could just wade out into the shallows, waist deep, put on your goggles, look down, and there would be these tiny baby angel sharks hiding in the sand. And there were loads of people just sunbathing on the beach, and they didn't even know that the most endangered species of shark was just hiding there in the shallows waiting for them to go and see. So that was the most endangered species of animal that I've ever seen. And then, yeah, I've been there when new species of coral was discovered.
So that was a great question. We're going to move on to Miss Bontempo's grade 5 class from Stafford.
Question?
How are you doing today? Do you have any good questions?
Good question. Okay. I don't know if she was sure of the angel shark.
Come on up. If you have a question, come on up.
She wanted to know if she had a picture of the angel shark.
Oh, I
I
don't
don't
know.
think that's an actual.
Do we have another question?
Any question?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, we'll come right back. And Miss Nord's grade 2 class from Freehold, New Jersey. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Good.
We have a question.
Have you came up with a solution to get plastic out of the water?
Ooh, very, very good question. So there's a lot of research currently happening to try and clear the plastic out of the sea, because constantly, every single minute, a truckload of plastic gets dumped into the ocean. Every single minute. So that's quite a lot of plastic. How can we stop that? Well, we can either stop it at the source. So we can try and put like barges across a river, like a kind of net. So a couple of people are developing nets that capture plastic before they go into the sea. And then there was a big project called the Ocean Cleanup Project, which aimed to try and take a really kind of big net out into the sea and slowly tow it along, and for that to collect plastic. But it was so big it kind of broke. And there's still a lot of research happening at the moment with that, trying to develop it a bit further. And then obviously there's beach cleans as well that you guys can get involved in. Every time you go to the seaside or you go to your local waterways, you can pick up plastic. But at the moment in time, no one's really got a solution to cleaning up plastic. And especially because it's everywhere we've looked. Scientists that have gone to the Arctic have found plastic there. In the Antarctic, plastic has been found there. At the deepest parts of the sea, plastic is there. So it's everywhere. So how can we really clean that up? I'm not too sure. And people are still working it out. But what we can do, and what everyone here can do, is try and reduce the amount of plastic that even has the opportunity to get out into the sea. So reduce the amount of plastic you use. Don't buy a new water bottle if you've got one that you can refill. Say no to a plastic bag at the shop if you can carry your shopping in your hands. All these tiny little things add up to a massive amount. So that's what I would suggest. Maybe don't necessarily think about cleaning it up, because here's a metaphor for you. If we turned on the taps in the bathroom and just let the water keep on sloshing out, but we mopped up and we kept on mopping, would it make a difference? No, not really. We'd have to turn off the taps before we could clean up the mess. And that's the same with plastic. We have to stop producing it, stop using it, and then we can think about cleaning up the seas.
Okay, that was a really interesting question. Thank you. So we're going to go right to Miss Grinvald's grade 2 class from Burlington, Ontario. How's everyone doing today?
We're great. Thank you. We have one question. This is Jaden.
Did you ever see an octopus?
Jaden, that is such a good question. Yes, I have seen some octopuses. I've seen some big ones, but my favorite one was actually quite small. Have you ever heard of a blue-ringed octopus? Yeah? Yeah, so I got to see one of them in Lembeh in Indonesia. probably one of the most poisonous octopuses there are, but I got really close. And it didn't hurt me. It was all good. It was quite curious, and it came close to my camera. But yeah, the blue-ringed octopus, that was my favorite one I've ever seen.
Awesome, thank you. We're gonna go to Ms. Rhodes' grade 4 class from Brevard, North Carolina. How is everyone doing today?
Good.
Good.
Somebody want to come up and ask a question? Okay, we do have a question.
What is your favorite marine life? Why?
Do you mind repeating that question? Sorry.
Say that. You come closer.
What is your favorite marine life? Why?
Ooh, a good question. It's a hard question, actually. So I really love octopuses and squid. I love the idea of giant squid. I've never seen one. But if you can imagine that down in the depths where we can't even see and we really struggle to understand are animals which are 10 times the size of one of you. And they're really abundant, and sperm whales go and hunt them down. I think that's so awesome, and they're so mysterious, and we still don't know anything about them. So that's why they're my favorite, because they're so elusive and so mysterious. But my most favorite animal that I've ever been able to see is the blue-ringed octopus. Yeah.
That is really cool and really neat to hear about. We're gonna go to Mrs. McInnes' class. Grade 4 from Cape Elizabeth, Maine. Can you unmute your device and ask any questions that you have?
What's the farthest you've gone down?
Cool. Very cool question. Back to diving. I like it. So I have been down to 60 meters. And I know you guys work in feet. So do you have any idea how deep that is in feet? I'll quickly do it on my calculator. That's 198 feet deep. So it gets pretty dark down there, pretty cold, but it was awesome. Yeah, it was in Belize, off the coast of Belize in the Caribbean. And it was this dive site called the Blue Hole. And you might have seen pictures of the Blue Hole on Google, but it's basically like this really cool reef and then this hole that just drops down into the abyss. And it opens up, and it's got stalagmites and stalactites. So it's really awesome. So yeah, that was my deepest dive.
Awesome. Just to jump in for a second, Madison, I just want to say, first of all, for the classes, you guys should all look up the Blue Hole because it's amazing. It's one of the most beautiful sights on Earth. And I also want to pass along a question from YouTube. So we have a group, Lakeside Elementary, grade 1's Miss Sheldon's class, that wanted to ask, where did you find the most plastic, May?
So the most plastic that I've ever seen in one location was in Lembeh, in Indonesia. Now, there's like always a bit of stereotyping with plastic pollution, saying that it always comes from Asia. And there is a lot of plastic coming from Asia, but that's because they don't really have the infrastructure to manage their waste properly. They have been they're importing all this plastic from other countries and don't have the ability to get rid of it. But that saying, you don't really have to go that far to see a lot of plastic. And around me on the coast of England, we still get a lot of plastic pollution washing up on our beaches. So it's not always remote places that get the biggest hit of plastic pollution. But from my personal experience, the most that I've ever seen was in Asia.
All right, awesome. That's pretty interesting to hear. So we're going to go to Miss Matthews' grade 6 class from Tweed. How's everyone doing today?
I know bycatching is a problem, so how can fisheries catch fewer sharks by catching?
Really, really good question. So there are a lot of technology being developed around fisheries and especially sharks. And did you know that sharks have a sixth sense? So we have five. Your touch, taste, hearing, sound, smell, sight. I think that's five. Sharks have a sixth one, which is electroreception. So they can pick up electrical impulses in the water. And they're normally attracted to something that gives off an electrical impulse. But sometimes if you change that electrical impulse a little bit, they don't like it and they keep away from it. So what some fisheries are doing are making little like electrical impulse emitters and putting it along their nets so that it deters the sharks away. And that's probably one of the best things that we've developed to try and keep sharks away from nets. But that being said, you still can't really help catching sharks, and it depends what you're catching. If you're doing tuna, if you're eating tuna even, try and go for tuna which is like pole line caught, because that way they catch each tuna individually and not putting a net out there which might catch bycatch. So just trying to choose more sustainable ways of fishing as well is another option. Trying to fish in smaller amounts rather than putting a massive net out and just catching whatever comes is a good way too.
Okay.
Bycatch. Madison, sorry if I could jump in for 2 seconds. Just for the classes, I really want to note that if you guys are US classrooms, Seafood Watch is an app you can use. And if you're Canadian classrooms, Ocean Wise is an app you can use. So you can literally go to any restaurant, grocery store, type in the fish that you're about to eat, and then you can see what sort of things, if it's sustainably fished or not sustainably fished. So you can really, really easily learn that sort of information for any fish you guys are going to eat. That's all I wanted to add. Sorry.
All right, so we're gonna swing around to Miss Bontemple's class again. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes, we do.
How old were you when you started scuba diving? Like when you got your like career doing it?
Cool. Yeah. So I started scuba diving from the age of 12. So pretty young, and that was the youngest that you could start at my age. I think now it's actually lower, so you can start at maybe the age of 12. I mean, I said 12, 10. You can start at the age of 10. Thank you, my brain, for correcting me. So yeah, you can start really young now, but I started at 12. But again, I was really lucky because my dad's a scuba diving instructor. Ooh. So I sneakily got in there from the right young age of 12 because of that. So yeah. But yeah, you can start at the age of 10 now.
Oh, there we go. Okay, well, that's really awesome to hear. So we have enough time to go around for some more questions. So we're going to start with Miss Lou's class again. Do you guys have any more questions that you want to ask May?
What's your favorite?
What's your favorite animal? What's your favorite animal?
Oh, my favorite animal ever, I think that question was. Yeah. So yeah, my favorite animals are normally like the octopuses and the squid and the cuttlefish, because they're so awesome. I'm going to whack out a few facts to just prove to you how awesome that they are. An octopus has the intellect of a 3-year-old. However, they only ever live to 3 years old. So imagine being born straight away with all of that knowledge in your head. Pretty cool. And the fact that they can change color instantaneously, they can solve puzzles, that is so intriguing to me. I think that is just totally awesome and just kind of changes the way that we think. Like, we always think that we're the cleverest things on planet Earth. Well, you know, intelligence evolved on land, evolved in the sea. So that's why I love octopuses.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next classroom. Miss Nord's class, do you have any extra questions that you want to ask?
We do.
Have you ever seen a hammerhead shark?
Oh, goodness, honestly, this is post-traumatic distress talking about hammerhead sharks. I'll tell you why. Because I have always wanted to see a hammerhead shark, because I think they're again, well, everything in the sea is awesome, but they're really awesome. But on one dive, we were just kind of pootling along, looking at the reef, checking it out. And I was hanging out the back of the group that we were diving with. And I could hear that someone was like, come and have a look at this. And I was like, oh, it's nothing cool. It'll be fun. It'll probably just be a fish of some sort. And then when everyone popped up from the dive, they were like, did you see that hammerhead shark? And I was like, no, I was so distraught. Most annoying dive of my life. But yeah, no, I was probably really close to one, but I didn't see it. That's a long-winded answer to your question, but there you go.
All right, so we're gonna move on over to Miss Rhodes' class. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes. Were you ever in a dangerous situation underwater?
I have been actually. So I normally, when people say like, do you get scared scuba diving? There's so many things that can kill you underwater. Inferring about the animals. I'm like, no, the scariest thing for me is the ocean itself, because it is so powerful and can switch up at any moment. And one time I was on a dive, which was like a drop off. So a reef that kind of just goes off and then it's blue as far as you can see. And the currents change really quickly, normally side to side. But at this one spot, the current also pushed downwards. And when you're diving, you kind of normally have to stay at a certain level under the water because you don't want to go too deep if you haven't got the right equipment. But at one point, the current was actually pushing me deeper and deeper and deeper. And I was kicking upright and I wasn't able to go up because the current was so strong. So I had to kind of make my way to the reef and kind of cling on until this current kind of stopped, like a gust of wind, basically. And then it kind of faded away and then I could carry on my dive. But that was probably one of the scariest moments underwater, was being pushed by the current and not being able to swim against it.
Awesome.
But diving's cool. Don't let it take that away from you.
So we have another question from Lakeside Elementary School joining in with us on YouTube. So they're asking, can tiger sharks and other species eat plastic?
Yes, they can. So there's like two answers to that in a way. Like tiger sharks are also known as like the junkyard of the sea in a way, and they've been found with some crazy stuff in their stomach, like a car tire and a sack of potatoes and some boxing gloves. Really random stuff have ended up in tiger sharks' bellies. But another way of plastic kind of getting in there into sharks is through the food chain. So if we kind of work our way backwards, tiger sharks are at the top of their food chain. But tiger sharks eat turtles, and turtles have been known to eat plastic. So it can make its way to a shark through that kind of food chain. And it's the same with any kind of shark. Whatever they eat, every kind of organism that scientists have looked at have plastic within them. So it kind of trickles up that way from the very smallest fish in the food chain all the way to the top.
Great. So Miss McInnes's class, if you have any questions, and you can unmute yourself and then ask May, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Jack. What's the rarest fish you've ever seen?
Hey, Jack. So the rarest fish that I've ever seen, I think, was the angel shark. And you should have a look at them. They are really endangered, but they're absolutely gorgeous. They're really flat. And they, hi guys. Yeah, they all like kind of, they sink themselves into the sand, and they're really long and really big, but they look like an angel underwater. But they're endangered because they kind of get impacted by the fishing industry a lot. More so than any other shark because they don't move a lot. So that's their problem. But yeah, an angel shark was my rarest animal.
Very, very cool. We're gonna move over to Miss Matthews' class. Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Go talk to them.
How can we rebuild the fish population that have been overfished?
I like that question. So a way of rebuilding fish populations is to let areas recover. So I'm sure you guys might have heard of marine protected areas. There's loads of case studies about places which have been decimated by overfishing, but what they do is they leave that area. No one fishes in that area. They let the fish breed again, restock, and then because there's so many fish in that one area, it overspills into different areas. So that fishermen can fish around a protected area and leave the fish in the main circle alone to kind of keep on breeding, keep on being healthy, and it will grow so much that it spills over so you can still fish, but not in that zone. So keeping places totally safe from fishermen is the way to go to rebuild populations.
Okay, and Miss Grinwald's class, you have the last question of the day. So if you have anything that you want to ask.
She said Miss Grinwald. Wow.
Okay, well, maybe it's not the right time for a question. Okay, so, well, I just want to say thank you to May and thank you to all of the classrooms who had questions. They were really, really interesting, and I'm sure May had a lot of fun answering them. May, it sounds like you're doing amazing things with your research and your underwater adventures and your scuba diving. So we want to thank you for that. And I'm excited to have, well, to host again with you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. Sorry if I spoke a little bit too fast, but I hope I've kind of given everyone a bit of an idea of what marine biology could lead you onto and the awesomeness that is scuba diving and spending time with sea creatures.
Okay, so before we end everything, I'm just going to unmute all the classrooms. If everyone wants to say a big goodbye to May, that would be Good night, everyone. Thank you for today. Bye.